From rolling tumors to roaring lampooners, the Tigers on a Roll show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Tigers on a Roll. Thank you for tuning in. I know that it is a slow period kind of everywhere if you're really only a fan of the big three. There's not a lot of news coming out of the football facility, and underwhelming showings by basketball sort of ruins the hype around the spring sports, especially when a bad basketball team follows up a bad football team. And football certainly failed the fans in the fall. And if you could not tell by students leaving with 2, 3, 4 minutes left to play last night, the energy is incredibly low surrounding the Auburn basketball team right now. And I'll be honest with you, this was not the episode that I wanted to record today, because I half expected the basketball team to win this damn game. And we talked earlier this week about needing to get back to 500 in conference play and how big of an asset the jungle is when it comes to assisting this team with home court advantage, because it is supposed to be one of the most difficult places for visiting teams to play. But instead, we're waking up today to a third straight loss, second straight loss at home, and Vandy defeats the Auburn Tigers 84-76. Sure, they're ranked in the top 20, but if a couple balls dropped, the other way for Auburn could be a top 20 team still. And for the first time in a decade, maybe even longer than that, the Commodores walked out of Neville Arena with a win, which is so embarrassing. And they didn't just win. Vanderbilt controlled the entire game. Auburn led for a grand total of 20 seconds the entire night, and their largest lead, as I tweeted out last night, was 1 whole point. And if you look at the stat sheet without seeing the final score, you honestly probably thought Auburn would have won this game. We out-rebounded them by 9 boards. We had a total of 31 boards, and we only turned the ball over, I think it was 7 times. 7 or 8 times. But you cannot win a game shooting 32% in the first half, which is where the stat sheet, the box score at the end of the game, that's what it doesn't show you that, because they ended up turning it on a little bit in the second half, but 32% in the first half is absolutely abysmal. And Tahad Pettiford did everything that he could to help the Tigers win. He ended the night with 21 points, and that is back-to-back 20-point games for him. So Tahad, with his new braids, cornrows, whatever, maybe big game Hod is trying to break through, but it has not been enough. Because at the end of the day, he was still 7 of 18 shooting. And then you had Keyshawn Hall, who was an absolute stud and is usually the anchor for this team. Hall was held to just 3 of 13 from the field, and he sat for most of the second half. I think it was like 12 and a half minutes he sat. Something like that. And then you had Vanderbilt's Jalen Washington and Tyler Tanner going ballistic, playing out of their minds, scored half of the points for Vandy, and they shot the lights out in Neville Arena and absolutely dominated the Auburn Tigers. Every single time Auburn made a run, and they did eventually make runs, and they did eventually cut the lead to 4 late in the second half, but Vandy had answers to everything. Auburn just could not get the stops they needed on defense, and that has been the story of this season. They have been atrocious on defense, and it is killing us. You had Stephen Pearl going so far as to saying, in the presser, that the fans did their part and the team didn't do theirs. And, to be completely honest, let's start with, I'll give him credit for recognizing that. But to be completely honest, when I was watching this on the broadcast, Neville was dead. The fans they showed up in person. They did not show up with any sort of energy. Neville was so dead. And you could see it. You were seeing people while play was going on. People from the student section heading for the exit. You had Tahad Pettiford was getting a rebound, and there was a line of kids walking towards the door in their tiger striped furry bucket hats. And it was infuriating. It's infuriating to see that. And at the end of the day, sure, the team and the fans both showed up in person, but that's all they did. Neither of them showed out for Auburn in any way. And that sums it up. I mean, he's right, but that sums it up for the fans and the team. They were certainly there, but not much else came of it. And you've got to ask, because it begs the question, where does this leave us? Auburn is 14-10 overall, 5-6 in the SEC. We've slipped to 11th in the conference. And if the season ended today, I think we'd be playing on Wednesday in the SEC tournament, which sets up for a terribly, terribly long week if you're able to make a run at the finals in the SEC tournament. That is a difficult schedule to play if you start playing on day one. And to avoid that and get a first round bye, we probably need to go 5-2 over the final 7 games. But look past the SEC tournament, because we're not winning that. The bigger picture is that most bracketologists had us at an 8 seed before the loss to Vandy. And yeah, this loss is a quad 1 loss, which is not, a killer. It doesn't kill Auburn's resume, but they have not proven that they can win these big games. The margin of error for the Auburn basketball team is officially, at this point in the season, 0. Auburn is grasping for any hold that they can get on the outside of this bubble as they slip away from it. They are grasping at it. And what needs to happen is we need to find a road win. There's a couple things that need to happen, but that is the number one thing that they need to do. And we head to Arkansas this Saturday for what sets up probably to be a quad 1 win on the road, which is better. I mean, it's better. It's better than what we've been up to on a three-game losing streak. And the Razorbacks are a tough team, and I talked about it on Monday. Calipari is not going to go down easy, but Auburn has to figure out a way to steal one on the road, because that offsets to some extent some of the home losses that we've been suffering to the hands of Bama and Vandy. And we still have games against Georgia and Mississippi State at home, which again could set up nicely to be quad 1. I mean, maybe 2, depending on how they shake out when they happen. Wins if you win them. And those are mandatory wins. It's not a question, like, if you win them, we're saying that as fans. But the Auburn Tigers basketball team absolutely has to win those games. That's the position that they're in right now. And then I think one of the final things that Stephen Pearl needs, just for PR purposes, but also it translates to something notable for the selection committee, is another signature win. You need to get another signature win before you close conference play, which will likely come at Kentucky or home against Tennessee. He has got to find a way to do that to convince the committee that we belong in the conversation at all. And if we can go, 5-2, and you finish the season at 19-12 and 9-9 in the SEC, I think you're in. You're safe. You made it by the skin in your teeth, but you are safe and you are in. But if that is not how that pans out and we finish 17-14, there is no guarantee on Selection Sunday that it goes our way. And it feels like the sky is falling. It has been an abysmal showing and very, very inconsistent play by the Auburn basketball team. But they have talent. They have talent. They just need to execute better. And they need to have the depth pieces step up and contribute. That is another thing that we have been missing with any consistency is good bench play that's worth something. All Vandy had to do was pack it in, and it was enough to completely mute Keyshawn Hall, who is our playmaker. And then that put the onus on the perimeter scoring, and that just shut down the whole operation because it didn't exist because no one stood up. No one could do it. We couldn't score from deep. We couldn't get in the paint. We couldn't hit layups. And we missed 25% of our free throws. Not a winning recipe. Execution was absolutely terrible in a game that you absolutely had to win. And they have got to put an end to this losing streak at all costs. I genuinely have no idea what Steven plans to do because there are times that he seems just as out of control as the guys scrambling to make something happen on the court. And this is no disrespect to him because I always want to support our coaching staffs, the administration, the players. This pseudo anger management issue persona or facade or whatever that he's got going on that got us a technical yesterday late in the game, which ended up spreading that 4-point margin that we were closing in on to basically 11 points to put the game out of reach. That's got to end. I don't know a single 18 to 21-year-old athlete that wants to look at a head coach with his face twisted up, sweating something out. After earlier in the season, Stephen Pearl said he doesn't want the boys to see him concerned about outcomes of games. Because you look pretty concerned when you're sitting there slamming shit, scowling at the refs, and your arms are folded basically the entire game. That's defeated body language. And I'm not saying that's my perception is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's what it actually is. I'm just saying that's my perception. And that is the one thing that I kind of have an issue with Stephen Pearl right now is that is a bad look. And the optics are not great on it. And the optics, to his credit, are not great on it because we're losing the games with that going on. But I think that is one thing that he needs to clean up personally. And I think some things on the court will naturally settle in if he's not tense like that for 40 minutes. Like something's got to change there. And I don't know what he's going to do about that. I don't know what he's going to do about this team. Burgomaster is in his bag. And I think he's used just about everything he can to scrape out some points from the bottom of the barrel that we have. But man, it's not looking great. And honestly, on a scale of 1 to 10, like how worried are you about Auburn missing the NCAA tournament? Because I want to get a gauge on this because I actually do think the sky is falling at this point. This basketball team does not look good, and I do not think they look good enough to play in March. I want to know what you think, and I want to know what you think about what needs to change right now. Like what can get better for us to be able to pull off some wins, because that's all we need. We just need some more consistency, and we need to find that one thing that we can make a change to. And I think we can win because we have the talent to do so. So let me know. And to end the show today, I also want to note something specifically for Auburn fans, but for any college basketball fan still spending any energy on the aftermath of this Bediako nonsense. I want to try to put this into the simplest terms possible. Yes, Alabama violated the NCAA bylaws. Yes. By the literal letter of the law, he was their bylaws. Now, see, that's the thing where people are getting caught up. Law, NCAA bylaws are not the law of the land, so to speak, in like the American judicial system. By the bylaws, he was ineligible from the jump as soon as he came back to Tuscaloosa. However, and this is the part that I think people are missing because they're misconstruing these two terms or they're intermingling them, which you cannot do. The actual law, the jurisprudence, the court issued a temporary restraining order, which temporarily restrained the NCAA and completely tied their hands for the period that he had until his court, they had their day in court. That did actually legally, by the law, prevent them from taking any action to stop him from playing. And they had to wait until Bediako and the NCAA and Alabama and all the lawyers involved and the judge was sitting on the bench until they all had their day in court. Now that the judge has denied the motions for a permanent injunction, essentially admitting what everyone's common sense told us all along, which is why this has been such a sticky issue, is because people can see this and know it's wrong. Now that that has been denied, now he is indefinitely ineligible. But because there was a TRO issued by a court, the NCAA couldn't do anything to enforce any of it. And they can't retroactively apply any sort of punishment to them because when the court told them they had to wait until they had their day in court, they were allowed to do it. So you can't retroactively apply a punishment to someone that was doing something they were allowed to do, whether or not common sense tells you that it's wrong or bad or whatever. I absolutely do not expect any sort of hammer to fall on Bama for the 5 games that Bediako played in, because Bama was technically authorized to play him. They were allowed to do it whether or not the bylaws said it. Now we know that they have to abide by the bylaws, but he was allowed to play. And the NCAA, this is for everyone that isn't understanding this, the NCAA was restrained by a court of law from enforcing their bylaws, their own rules. And it's frustrating. And I can tell that it's frustrating, everyone, but it's a loophole. And they took the chance to do it. And they ended up losing in court. But, I mean, they won like 3 out of those 5 games, I think. 4 out of those 5 games. And beat Auburn. But the results of those games are going to stand. And it's a whole different angle and analysis of whether or not the selection committee wants to, put less value on those wins or, completely discredit them or whatever. But as far as anything else happening, the court allowed him to play until it didn't, which for Auburn fans was a loss at home in Bediako's last collegiate game that he'll ever play in. So really unfortunate for us, but it is what it is because he was allowed to be there because the NCAA was restrained from enforcing their bylaws. And that's really that in a nutshell, and that's the end of it. At this point, we need to worry about playing better. We need to stop worrying about the school across the state because who cares? And you'll never see Bediako again. You just won't. You won't. So stop talking about him. I want that to if you want to clip that and you want to send it to your people that are still talking about it, because I know in my circles, people are still complaining about it. That is just what it is. And with that being said, we need to focus on ourselves because the whole rest of the season is a crapshoot because this team has shown that they can feast, but it has also suffered famine. And there is no telling what they will do for the rest of these games because I don't think that they're actually capable of repeatedly finding success. And they have not peaked at any point. And at this point in the season, it's getting too late to peak at all because you might miss the postseason. And we'll see how it all shakes out. But absolutely don't be surprised if Auburn misses the postseason or they make an early exit like they did a couple years ago when Yale put the nail in their coffin. But that's it for today, folks. I really appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like the video if you like it, share the video with other Auburn fans, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notifications. It helps the channel a bunch, and I think we're bringing some good content over to Auburn fans to check in on, especially as we get geared up for baseball, the end of basketball, and obviously all of the other Olympic sports that I like to cover here on Tigers at a Roll. War Eagle, y'all. I'll see you.